The rumor mill had been churning for months. Oleksiy Reznikov's days at the helm of Ukraine's defense ministry seemed numbered already back in February, when, after several corruption scandals came to light, President Zelenskyy launched a major crackdown against graft in the country. Reznikov was never directly implicated, but in a ministry under worldwide scrutiny, every accusation of mismanagement weighs heavy. Now, Reznikov has announced he's stepping down after the president called for unspecified new approaches in the ministry. Reznikov submitted his resignation to parliament, having overseen the armed forces throughout the Russian invasion. Zelenskyy has proposed the head of Ukraine's state property fund, Rustem Umerov, to take over. Lawmakers are expected to approve the appointment this week. Now, the defense minister's sacking follows the detention of a Ukrainian oligarch over the weekend on fraud and money laundering charges. Ihor Kolomoisky is one of Ukraine's most powerful businessmen who amassed a huge fortune following the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Ukraine's authorities allege he laundered millions of dollars worth of Ukrainian currency through banks he owned. He denies the charges. Tatiana Shevchuk is the head of international relations at the Anti-Corruption Action Center, a Ukrainian NGO mostly funded by the governments of the U.S. and EU member countries. She joins us tonight from Kyiv. Good to have you on the day. Now, tell us, how big a problem is corruption in Ukraine?
Indeed, corruption is a huge problem in Ukraine. At least it used to be for the last years. But I have to admit the huge progress Ukraine has made in recent years, and the low tolerance to the corruption people have. And currently, with the full-scale Russian invasion, the demand to fight corruption is even bigger than it used to be before.
How dangerous can widespread corruption become in this fight for Ukraine's very survival?
It is perceived as a threat to national security because, on the one hand, especially in the current situation, the money which is stolen or could be stolen from the state budget, this money is stolen from the war effort. So it means just like the soldiers on the front line, they do not receive necessary equipment or goods if the money goes somewhere else. But also it's a security threat because through those corruption relations, the Russian forces, they can penetrate their authorities, they can penetrate intelligence service, etc.
This was pretty much a taboo topic during the first year of the war. Did the government not know or just not prioritize corruption during the early months of the invasion?
I wouldn't say it was like taboo topic, but it was not just on the top of the list. Both the government and the society, especially, for instance, for investigative journalists, they were more concentrated on investigating Russian war crimes. A lot was happening. But when the situation calmed down, the economic activities returned, the issue of corruption became important once again. And for the government, they just responding the popular request from the inside of Ukraine and also the request of the allies who would like to have more accountability because they do spend lots of their taxpayers' money on Ukraine right now.
Yeah. Where are you and your organization observing corruption to be most pervasive at this point?
At this point, our most focus goes into the corruption in procurement on reconstruction efforts and procurement of Ministry of Defense, where currently the most of Ukrainian budget is concentrated.
President Zelenskyy wants to introduce a new law, maybe precisely looking at how corruption is perceived not only domestically, but also by the international allies that are crucial in this war effort. And, of course, how damaging this can be to the goal of fending off this attack. This law would equal corruption to treason during martial law. Is that the right way to go, in your opinion?
In my opinion, it's a bit populistic way to address the issue because their problem of corruption is not in the problem of the name. Of course, it's a fancy way of equalize, or maybe it's a way the people equalize in their head right now that the corruption during the wartime is a treason, but it's a political way or populistic way to say it because the difference between different criminal offenses in the criminal code is not in the names or in the terms of um, um, probable imprisonment terms. Their difference is in substance and in the way it's investigated. We believe that Ukraine has competent anti-corruption bodies that are capable of investigating corruption, and they are really doing the good job right now. So there is no need to reinvent their the names of criminal offenses or to give their investigative powers to the security service. In this regard, it's just to for the government is to step back and not to politicize the investigation of corruption and leave it for the competent bodies.
That's Tatiana Shevchuk of the Anti-Corruption Action Center. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, on the battlefield, there are signs that Kyiv's counteroffensive might be gaining pace. Ukrainian generals claim their troops have punched through the first of Russia's 3 defensive lines on the southern front. Now, we have not been able to verify those claims. The details remain murky, but they have been echoed by the Pentagon and military observers. The footage you're about to see was supplied by Ukraine's military and is said to show a Russian assault on an assault on Russian trenches near the Russian-occupied town of Bakhmut. Russia's defensive lines are heavily mined, and Ukrainian forces have struggled to break through them. Oleksiy Reznikov is the deputy head of the International Crisis Group's Europe program and joins us now. Good to see you. Now, at a meeting today with the Turkish president, Vladimir Putin said the Ukrainian counteroffensive had failed. There has been criticism of the slow pace of it all. That criticism has been decisively rejected by Ukraine's Minister of Foreign Affairs. What is your assessment of how it's going?
Yes, well, this counteroffensive has been much hyped for months before it even started. And I think it's fair to say that progress has been slower than hoped for by Kiev and certainly by some of its Western backers. It had a slow and sort of a rough start with a lot of Western equipment lost and Ukrainian lives lost. That's because the Russian defensive lines were really entrenched, very heavily mined, several layers deep. And so it required a pivot and a change in strategy. Now we're seeing this phase where Ukraine is advancing more confidently. As you said, it's pierced the first lines of Russian defenses, and we're seeing it advance in the direction where Ukrainian forces are trying to achieve a breakthrough in order to cut off Russia's land bridge to Crimea. But it's still a very slow and grinding counteroffensive. It's really too early to say that it's failed, but I would be hesitant to say we're going to see the type of successes that we saw last year with capturing territory, which set expectations really high.
I want to get your view on the sacking of the Minister of Defense because it is the biggest shakeup we have seen since the start of this full-scale invasion. What do you think is behind his dismissal?
Yeah, so as we heard, there have been rumors of swirling for quite a long time about his replacement. His reputation took a hit over these corruption scandals, which were linked to enlistment centers and procurement problems. It's important to say he was never implicated in himself. In fact, he's going to take up a post as Ukraine's ambassador to the UK. So he isn't disappearing into obscurity. He has been a very prominent figure, and in going to European capitals and to DC and lobbying for more weapons and discussing military strategy. So, I think it's about a change at this particular moment. It might be about fighting corruption primarily and maybe boosting morale at a time when the counteroffensive is moving forward.
Yeah, and that change is very likely to bring in Rustem Umerov. What can you tell us about him?
Well, he's a really interesting figure. He was in the private sector before coming to government, and most recently, he was the head of a government agency that sold state assets to the private sector, and he's credited with turning that around. So it could be to send this message that he's a good manager and that the ministry will be in capable hands. He's also a skilled negotiator. He has this reputation for being one. He was part of the negotiations with Russia 1 month after the invasion. He was part of the talks around the Black Sea grain deal that were mentioned, with Putin allowing Ukrainian grain to be exported for a certain amount of time through the Black Sea. And, you know, he's been part of prisoner exchanges. So these are good signals for somebody who's going to have such a prominent position in the Ukrainian government and in the fight that is engaged. But he's also interesting because he's Crimean. He's a Crimean Tatar. Sorry.
No. Go on. He's a Crimean Tatar. He obviously wants Crimea back under Ukrainian control. So maybe domestically and internationally, what signal does that send? And we don't have much time, but maybe we can all wrap it into one, because you say that he played a key role in these negotiations. Is that going to be significant for what he's going to do now? Are we looking at maybe, Zelenskyy shifting his red lines? Are we seeing him eyeing peace talks at this point and bringing him in because of that?
So I really don't think that's necessarily the message that wants to be sent with this, and it's particularly at a time when there is still a really hard battle being fought at the front lines. I don't think that Zelenskyy is trying to send a message that he's ready to negotiate, certainly not at the moment, and not with a Russia that is not willing to come to the table. Or weakened. But it is interesting that some people have read it, the fact that he is a Crimean Tatar. He's from a people who
We'll have to leave it here.
Sorry.
I'm so sorry. I would have liked to keep this going. Alyssa de Carbonell, we'll speak again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.